Behind the Shades.
And you use this you use this method, I should say, to assist those who are experiencing sexual dysfunction as well.
Absolutely. I think sexual dysfunction is at an all-time high right now, especially even in younger men. And before we started chatting, we did mention things like porn addiction, and I think we could get into that a little bit more from here. I think that a lot of the sexual dysfunctions that we're seeing is also due to a lack of sexual education and really being aware of our bodies, being able to stay present with our bodies, because let's face it, like in the Western world, we're always searching for like novelty, like the next novelty, whether it's binge watching Netflix or watching porn every single day, that's going to have a big effect on our brains.
All the men under 25 are like, when it comes to sexual dysfunction and porn. Good Lord. I used to, I can't believe you have me sharing all kinds of stuff today, Ava. I used to watch interviews on porn stars because I found them fascinating, because I want to understand what makes them do what they do. And you begin to realize they're regular people like you and I. They're not superheroes or superheroines, but you're right. I had a friend. He was completely addicted, hours a day on porn. And it kind of took over his life. And when you say porn addiction and sexual dysfunction, I'm guessing you're drawing a connection with it because you're always looking for that next hit of dopamine, and you want to raise the bar and raise the bar and raise the bar. So is it something that you find is impacting younger men and women at a higher rate these days versus, let's say, years past?
Absolutely, because look at the type of porn that we're watching, right? So, like, even as we talk about like AI, like as things are becoming more realistic, right? Or even the type of porn we're watching might be more I don't know, like throughout the years, you have to get a little bit more, I don't want to say violent with the type of porn. There are some types of violent porn out there, but because of that constant dopamine hit, it's like people are getting bored of the porn that was, considered porn 30 years ago. So again, it's going back to that constant search for dopamine. And again, like I'm not anti-porn, by the way. I respect sex workers. I was a sex worker myself. I was a stripper, for a while. And like, there's a huge respect for that. But I think that because of the lack of sexual education that we have, when we start to get our sexual education through porn at such a young age, it's automatically starting to rewire those neural pathways to continue seeking it into adulthood. And this is especially prevalent for men. I think that for men, I'm not trying to generalize too much here, but for men are mostly visual creatures, and the brain is wired a little bit differently. So as you start, I think it's a huge number that boys are starting to watch porn like from 10 years old, maybe younger, into adulthood. So you have to think about the context of this individual who still has their brain developing, and they've never received sexual education, like proper sexual education, like about pleasure and orgasm, and not just like, okay, you do this thing and don't get pregnant type of shit, right? So again, moving into adulthood, we're already suffering from this this need for us to continue looking for that dopamine, and it's the only thing we're familiar with. So it can be something that's very difficult to break out of. And I also believe that we should use the word addiction very lightly here in the conversation, because I think that the word addiction can also imply shame and guilt. But instead, I want to empower men and women to use porn or erotica in very healthy ways, where they're still accessing their fullest pleasure potential. And you did mention, right, how does sexual dysfunction tie into this? And again, it's because, again, as we search for those constant dopamine hits and it changes the receptors in our brain, it then creates a lack of sensation. So emotionally, we start to feel like the things in our external world no longer fulfill us. So we can become bored with the things that we once saw that were like pleasurable and fun and, the things we took joy in. And then on a physical level, you can start to create numbness in the genitals too for watching too much porn.
That's a great point you mentioned, Ava, because I remember reading something where there were people who were watching porn a lot, and the connection that they had with themselves was very similar to that which they would have with their partner. So, for example, if I'm a single man and you're a single lady, and I have a sexual appetite for porn, because I believe that's a better terminology than addiction. To your point, there's shame and there's guilt. So my sexual appetite is that every time at 9 p.m., I tell Ava, have a good night. I jump on my computer and I do my thing. I'm building a connection with myself and what I see. But that's replacing the connection that maybe you and I should be developing. Is there a way to maybe, or I guess my question to you is that the type of imbalance that you're speaking of, where the men or the women, they're more dependent on that type of erotica versus another form of it, i.e. the one between two people?
Absolutely, because again, like it's the only thing, if that's the thing that you're familiar with, that's the thing that your brain is going to keep seeking out in order to get that dopamine hit. So if we don't have that awareness going into it, it's very hard to shift those patterns. And then if we talk about terms of, the trauma or the impact of trauma on porn usage, that's really big too. A lot of men that I work with, a lot of times they become dependent on porn, not because the porn is fulfilling and they love it so much and they can't live without it, but because there's a fear of intimacy there. There's a fear of connection, and they're able to get a certain part of that from watching porn and, being able to have an orgasm, right? And that becomes easier, that becomes more novel, right? And again, our brains are like really freaking amazing because they're so intelligent, right? It's like, okay, that path is easier. I also don't have to deal with the trauma and the beliefs coming up. So I'll just do that, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But if we're not catching it, we're like, we're dependent on the porn, then basically it's like our sex lives or our sexual appetites are controlling us. We're not in control of it. And we don't want that to happen, right? It's taking the power out of the situation and we don't have control at that point.